Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina, and I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar today on how to harness blockchain in the not-for-profit sector. Specifically today will be for social impact. Today's webinar will be presented to you by Damien Hyder from Social Suite and Joyce Zhang from IXO. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any questions during the session, please type it in the questions box on your webinar panel, and Damien or Joyce will answer them at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you have any technical issues, please also type it in the question box and I will try my best to help you with it. Please note that if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all the other programs to help you have the best experience possible today. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that this webinar will be recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you all within a week after the webinar ends. You will then be able to access it at any time you need to. So that's all from me. So I'll pass it over to Damien and Joyce, who will take it from here.
Hi everyone, my name is Damien. I'm from Social Suite.
I'm Joyce, and I'm from IXO.
And yeah, thanks very much for your time today. We're quite excited to tell you about some of set applications of blockchain for measuring social impact. So I'll just start with a quick introduction on Social Suite and IXO. So Social Suite is a Melbourne-based company. We create technology that helps not-for-profits, funders, etc., measure their social impact, collect data, and create social impact reports.
And IXO is the blockchain for impact, and we are technically a Switzerland foundation, or Swiss-based foundation that holds our IP, I guess, for the blockchain.
And I guess a special thanks also to Joyce, who's all the way here in Melbourne from travel from Cape Town, yeah. And helping us with our partnership between Social Suite and IXO for this application of their blockchain to measuring social impact. So just a quick agenda for everyone. We're going to start with a little bit of an introduction on what Social Suite's impact measurement technology is, and then we'll talk a little bit about Social Suite plus IXO, how we're applying blockchain for measuring social impact, followed by Joyce will give a quick blockchain 101 introduction, and then cover a few case studies on how blockchain is being used for social impacts, and then we'll launch into a discussion and Q&A. So about Social Suite, just to give you a bit of an example, there's about $1 trillion invested globally trying to address funding programs and services around the world that are designed to address the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have been put down by the UN. And one of the issues is that billions of dollars are wasted funding inefficient programs and services. We have lots of organisations and NGOs doing really great stuff as well that just don't have a way to articulate and measure the impact that they're having. And what measuring impact will do is, number one, it allows organisations to have visibility on their impact so they can improve their services, and it also allows them to prove to their funders that they're actually achieving what they say that they're doing. Now, the issues around this big pool of money moving around the world funding these sustainable development goals is that funders are now starting to demand more social impact reports on their investments, but they don't know what to measure, and neither do the organisations that they provide funding to. So what happens is external consultants are engaged to design tailor-made social impact measurement metrics for once-off usage. And usually what will happen is, this great metrics will get developed, which will involve a data collection plan that will need to be collected over 5 years from multiple different stakeholders, beneficiaries. It could have data from different systems. It could have data from any kind of information you can imagine. And these usually get thrown over the fence to the NGO in an Excel sheet, for example, and the frontline staff at the service provider are burdened with the long-term data collection. So once the data is collected, how do you trust the data, and how do you share the knowledge? So if you've created some kind of really great breakthrough in solving some kind of social issue, how does this get shared around the world in a way that can help lift everyone up? So Social Suite is a solution for this data collection piece, and we'll talk about how the blockchain applies to the trusting of the data and sharing the knowledge a little bit in Joyce's section. So Social Suite is a data collection platform with mobile app, which features an online marketplace where any consultant or university or researcher or psychologist or an expert who's created an impact measurement metric or framework can host their IP, and any organization can download this social impact measurement metric and measure their social impact. So it saves time, improves services, and helps secure funding with social impact reports. So as I mentioned, how does it work? The measurement, a marketplace of impact measurement metrics is available with, we've got about 200 different impact measurement frameworks that are hosted there at the moment, from anything from disability programs to youth recidivism to family care. And these are created by third-party experts. An organisation will find an impact measurement framework and download it into the Social Suite platform, which provides a mobile app, survey functionality, kiosk functionality through tablets, etc., for frontline staff and stakeholders and other data sources to easily provide the data required by the impact measurement framework. It then automatically collates this data over time into impact measurement reports, and through our partnership with ICSO's blockchain for social impact protocol, we can then create proof of impact, create verified impact reports, and also create a big pool of shared knowledge that people can leverage off around the world to improve their social impact. So who uses Social Suite? Funders use Social Suite for figuring out where they can best deploy their capital into investing in new social impact projects, new NGOs, new charities. Community service organisations use social impact reports to prove their impact, improve their services, and show funders that they're achieving what the impact they said they will. And impact measurement consultants upload their social impact measurement metrics and frameworks to get it to a wider audience of NGOs and charities who can then use that to measure their impact and learn from previous groups that have come along. So we've got several fairly established business. We've got customers all across Australia, from small, medium to large not-for-profits, corporate social responsibility users, government, and also foundations and funders. So how does blockchain apply here? We're very excited because Social Suite provides an impact measurement report. It provides the ability for frontline staff to easily collect data through iPads. And when we learned about ICSO last year and their efforts to create a global blockchain protocol that's going to help verify impact claims, tokenize impact, we were very keen to do some work with them. So we partnered with ICSO to add the second layer to what Social Suite achieves and allow things like work with social impact bonds, smart contracts for funding, where money and funding is released based on verified social impact that can be done through the blockchain protocol like ICSO, and also having the verified data and being able to share the data globally. So the partnership with ICSO has been going for about 6 months now. And we're very excited to be working with them. And now I'll hand over to Joyce to tell you a little bit more about ICSO and provide some case studies on blockchain for social impact.
Sure. Thank you, Damien. So this slide, I'll go over blockchain for any of you who may not be super queued up. So blockchain is a distributed database that solves the problem of trust, transparency, and accountability during a transaction between two or more parties. Using advanced cryptography, each block of data is stored on a chain across a network of computers or nodes. So the information is not only decentralized, but also distributed, which means there's no single person who controls everything and no single point of failure. So distributed ledger technology frameworks such as blockchain eliminate the need for and reliance on central authorities such as banks and governments. And a good analogy, I think, is something like Google Docs. So when Damien and I were preparing for this presentation, we had a Google slides deck. But if this were on kind of like a siloed, and Damien had this on his PowerPoint and he was sick or something, then my entire presentation would be gone. Similarly, the blockchain, there's no single point of failure, and everyone can record transactions on it. There is some sort of consensus protocol that I guess Google doesn't have, but we can discuss that later, and how it relates to ICSO. So ICSO is a blockchain designed specifically for impact, and it allows individuals and organizations to collect, verify, and tokenize impact data into digital assets called impact tokens upon verification. So what this means is we go through this kind of framework where impact data is currently being collected, and so this is just the data that is really in the field right now that I'm sure many of you are collecting about your projects, about the people in the projects, about your outcomes. And this is also where Social Suite really fits in to help structure that data and make it collectible and usable in a useful manner. And then we bring in the data valuation piece where project owners or whoever sets up these projects, maybe funders, want to verify that data against some sort of metric or against their own evaluation tools. That transaction gets sent through the ICSO protocol and creates proof of impact in the form of these different tokens. So a token is really kind of like a cryptography term, but it's just a verified data asset. So it's just the verified impact data. And then a part of that also goes into what we call the global impact ledger, which goes onto kind of the sharing knowledge piece where we have a decentralized ledger with all the different impact projects and impact events that have been going on, all the verified ones, I should say. And whoever created that project or whoever owns that data can then share it with the world or perhaps sell it or have some sort of agreement with other people who want to use it, such as governments, researchers, universities, etc. And then the last part of that is more on the funding, which is where we create an impact marketplace, where these tokens, you can imagine, can be traded or bought by impact investors, by governments, and also just peer-to-peer trading. So now I'll go through two examples, the first two examples of case studies on ICSO. So the first one is a project called Ampli, which is being implemented by Trust Lab, a Cape Town-based blockchain innovation studio. So Ampli is a mobile decentralized application for early childhood development practitioners in South Africa to use to take attendance. So Ampli is used to replace the existing paper-based system to register children for a government-funded preschool subsidy. And data is being collected about the children, the classes, the service providers, as well as the centers. But each claim or each kind of data piece that needs to be verified is the children's attendance, and the evaluation is the verification of that attendance. Currently, that's being done by the practitioners. We can imagine a future where each child could actually verify their own attendance using biometrics, a fingerprint scan, facial recognition, but that technology currently isn't super advanced, especially not for African children. So the system in which this operates is the Department of Social Development in South Africa provides a per child per day subsidy for children who have access to early childhood education. So in the Western Cape, which is mainly where we operate, that's 15 Rand, which is about 1.5 Australian dollars. And these subsidies are given to children who qualify as low income. So for women like Nomsa, pictured here, who own and operate these ECD centers, the subsidy may not seem like a lot to us, but it's actually critical for their operations and success, because most of the families can barely afford to pay the fees, let alone any other money to support the running of these centers. However, in order to access the subsidy, she has to submit a paper form, such as the one, not exactly this one you see, but a similar form, where she has to tally up all the children with their ID numbers, how many times they've attended in the month or quarter, and then transfer that onto another Schedule B form given by the government, and then bring that in person to the department in the city to then get her subsidy. So obviously this creates an administrative burden for the centers themselves, having to do this all on paper, spend time out of their day, hours out of their month tallying these, but also administrative burden for the government agency that has to then administer these subsidies, going through all these paper forms, checking for duplicates, making sure the children actually qualify, tallying up the numbers, making sure there's no duplicates. And thus many schools aren't receiving an accurate amount in subsidies. So the National Development Plan vision for South Africa in 2030 actually wants to increase the amount of subsidies granted, which is really, really necessary, because I think now in South Africa they're not even reaching about half of what researchers say needs to be funded for ECD, but that would only further the backlog in the subsidy and administrative process. And in South Africa and most of the townships in which we operate, many children don't have South African ID numbers, so they don't even qualify for the subsidy, even though their families would qualify in an income means test. And so there's also room for double counting and then the inefficient allocation of funds by government. So Ampli strives to revolutionize the ECD release sector in South Africa. So our vision is to completely replace the existing paper-based system to register children for the subsidy, and with help from, or with funding I should say, and help from Innovation Edge, a South African ECD grant-making foundation, and UNICEF. We ran our first pilot between November 2016 and November 2017, and as you can see from our numbers, we really grew quite organically and quite big to cover a lot of centers within the Western Cape, and we are still growing. So in our first pilot, we created a mobile app that ECD centers could use to take attendance instead of using their paper-based system, which was great. You can see in that picture a woman learning how to use the app. And we also proved that these attendance claims could be ledgered to a blockchain. So that was pretty revolutionary, I would say. And we did so on Ethereum, but for scaling and kind of expense reasons, it wasn't really scalable to use Ethereum going forward, which is why ICSO was actually created out of Ampli to be a specific blockchain specifically designed for impact projects to house data and to house these transactions in a secure manner. So currently we're running Ampli 2.0, our second pilot, which is a small case study in a township called Frey in South Africa, and we're working to auto-generate the Schedule B forms, also store the data for the department to use in an Excel file, and continue to improve app functionality and usability through conversations with the service providers and ECD centers. And it's really great to get these people who don't have that much really involved in this tech development process. And I think they feel really like, I don't know, I don't want to say special, but just it feels really good for them too to be a part of this and to be using a technology that sometimes they wouldn't have access to. So this is an actual screenshot of the login page and the attendance taking page from our app. So how it works is every morning a service provider takes each child's attendance in the app, but then underlying that app is the blockchain and smart contracts through which a third-party evaluator can verify the attendance made by the service provider, and upon approval by the evaluator, the service provider will receive a verified record, which they can either use digitally or physically print out, that they can then show to the government, NGOs, and other parties for funding, subsidies, and just prove that the children are actually attending their schools. So currently, this is this auto-generated Schedule B form that we create for them. So this is the form that they will now print out at the end of the month or quarter, sign, and then bring to DSD. We hope in the future that this could also be what we call a token, or just tokenized and completely digital. So instead of actually having to print this out and bring to government, they can exchange this digital token that's in their wallet or in their mobile phone for the subsidy that they already qualify for. Another great thing out of our system is all this data gets stored in an Excel file, which is then usable for them as well as nonprofit organizations, funders, external funders, researchers who want to go in and see the work actually being done in the field. And so aside from kind of the administrative side and digitizing that whole process, the long-term impact of having blockchain and using blockchain in the system is creating really rich, trustworthy data about each person in the system. So for the service providers, they have to digitally sign every transaction, so every attendance is digitally signed by them. And then for each child, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the children in the system don't actually have South African ID numbers. So within their community, that may be okay because they, people can say that they live here, they've gone to school here, but once they leave that township or leave that community, their identity is almost non-existent. And what's really great about Ampli is we create a decentralized identifier, a digital identity for each of these kids that tracks every single time they were at an ECD center. And we have GPS coordinates on them to make sure that they were actually there, as well as the teacher or practitioner who's digitally signed and verified that they were there. So by the time they get to 6 years old and they graduate out of ECD and they start going to an actual school, they can look back on their digital identity and say, I did actually go for X amount of times, and based on schemas that currently are being standardized across the world, this digital identity can also be used in a variety of other systems, such as maybe health and safety, and we can start attributing different programs and different benefits to these students via these identities, as well as qualify them for certain benefits and certain programs that they may otherwise have been excluded from in the past. So Ampli, we hope to turn invisible children into invincible ones. So now I'm going to talk about a planned project. So this one's not currently being done, but we are scoping it out as we speak for the Development Impact Bond in India with UBS Optimus Foundation. So for this, ICSO wants to create smart impact bonds for improving educational outcomes for primary school children, particularly girls in India. And like in Ampli, there will be data captured about the children, about the centers, and about the staff, but the actual data that will be, or the claim capture, will be the performance in English, Hindi, and mathematics. And the impact evaluation on those claims will be a sample selection measured across these subjects 3 times a year by ways of a standardized test. So a little background about this project. Some of you may have read about or heard about this new initiative, the Educational Development Impact Bond Fund in India by the British Asian Trust, which is actually headed up by Prince Charles. And this project, or this fund I should say, seeks to invest $10 million in education initiatives to provide education for 200,000 children in India. And this bond fund is a performance-based fund that will support education providers across India through mentorship, courses, and other initiatives. And our project specifically will track the improved learning outcomes of primary school children across 190 schools in Delhi and Rajasthan. So our goal really is to show that a development impact bond, such as this one, can be implemented as a smart impact bond, which is what we call a blockchain-based impact bond using the ICSO protocol. So these bonds will be automated and, more importantly, highly replicable. Oh my God, highly replicable and cost-effective, and also optimized to deliver better development outcomes as well as higher financial returns. So our goals for this specific project is the formation of capital that is more distributed to deliver impacts relevant to the global goals, as well as increase financial flows to high-quality programs that deliver improvements, as well as, I think here, pinpoint where the money is going and not delivering outcomes, and being able to see maybe which schools aren't achieving and maybe which teachers are lacking, and then hopefully using big data, machine learning, AI in the future to help suggest solutions. And then lastly, just to contribute to the systemic change in the Indian educational system by improving coordination, performance, and financing of educational interventions using these lower cost and scalable smart impact bonds.
And just for those of you who might not have heard of what a social impact bond or a smart blockchain smart contract is, effectively when if you're looking at a traditional way of funding, it's changed a bit because the funding gets released based on pre-programmed information that can only releases funding based on verified social impact. So if you look at a scenario where you might have 100 kids have confirmed attendance over 2 years, the teachers have confirmed attendance, and then an independent tester has confirmed using by collecting this impact data. If after that time everything's verified, some funding is automatically released. So that's it's a bit of a different. It's sort of like systemizing releasing of funds based on this verified impact data.
So in this project, how it will work is that first, impact investors will use the ICSO portal. So that will be a web or probably web or mobile portal to set up their impact projects that will be underwritten by the bond. So then in India, so the educators will then create digital registries of all their children using self-sovereign digital identifiers or just decentralized identifiers. And then information about these children information about the education of these children will be recorded using a smartphone application. And these education claims will be compiled as the impact claims, and each claim will be digitally signed. Then the evaluation piece. The evaluation agents will then independently evaluate these claims, assisted by automated software that processes and validates the data. And then upon success, so whatever claims that come in that are deemed successful, will create proof of impact. Only the proof of impact will generate impact tokens that will go back to the impact investors. So that's kind of what Damien was talking about. In this new system, we like to call it a pay for success, and that's kind of terminology that's used, where the investors only pay for successful impact being created. So then in this fifth step, the investors can trade those impact tokens, those digitally verified impact tokens, for pre-agreed bond payouts as performance targets are met.
And just on number 5 as well, the way I've looked to understand it when I was first learning about this was an impact token is a collected set of information that is a proof of impact happening. It's sort of like a receipt. So when you spend money on something, you get a receipt to prove that a transaction has happened and something was delivered. An impact token is sort of a blockchainy way of describing a receipt for impact that has been achieved.
Yeah. And so the education impact tokens are then recorded in a global impact ledger. So that is kind of the data sharing piece, having this global impact ledger where all these events, so both from this project, from Ampli, from other projects that Social Suite might be working on, will be recorded here. And actually it'll be the hash or a pointer to the actual underlying data. So researchers, governments, or even organizations looking to set up new projects can see what's already being done. And then if they want access to the underlying data, probably more specific information, such as, I don't know, maybe names or just more specific information that wouldn't kind of be on that surface level, they can make some agreement, some deal with the person who owns the data to then have access to it.
And the reason that Social Suite's quite excited about this sharing of data, because Social Suite's a traditional SaaS model where we've got multiple not-for-profits and organisations around Australia. We've got 4 or 5 doing work in disability and 3 or 4 doing separate organisations with separate Social Suite systems doing work in youth recidivism. What we want to do is have a global a way for them all to share their knowledge, obviously anonymised and de-identified, but we want them to be able to share their knowledge. So the 3 that we've got currently using it can learn from each other and improve their services by sharing the data across similar measurement metrics, which is what this global impact ledger allows us to do.
Yep. And so the data on school performance really becomes a resource for the world and contributes to this big impact data commons that is actually being governed by our partners out in Berlin called Ocean Protocol. So they will use all their AI and machine learning on this impact data to then maybe pinpoint the ways certain schools are failing or certain schools are succeeding, and then pretty much optimize the way impact is being delivered. And I think that's really the exciting part, is not that there are so many great impact projects and work being done, but there's no kind of systematic way to look through the data, comb through it, analyze it, and then eventually optimize it. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. So kind of wrapping up with why blockchain is important and why blockchain really helps. I think in many ways, blockchain's, hello, can you still hear me? Oh, okay, I just got a message.
Yeah.
Okay,
did we drop out, or could we get a confirmation from our wonderful host that we're
okay.
We can still hear you.
We just got a message, that's it. Yeah, so in the way that a database kind of captures data at a point in time, blockchain captures data, but also over time. And I think that's kind of what you see in this image, in this cute little diagram of a little tree being planted. But really the impact of that tree being planted should be valued over time as it grows into a bigger tree or eventually a forest and starts providing habitat for animals and reduces CO2 from the air. And so that's what I think this ledger provides over a traditional database. So you have the provenance of impact data over time. You can be able to track through this ledger the impact data. And then the next 3 points about the transparency of funding, accountability for performance, and attribution of results really relates to the smart contracts. So a smart contract isn't actually a contract, but it's really a mechanism where something will be delivered upon the success or verification of a predetermined kind of outcome. So if we set up a smart contract, Damien, I'd say, if Damien feeds 100 children, then I will give him, $100. Upon verification into the system, that $100 would automatically be released, and so I would pay it kind of into an escrow account, and then upon the smart contract or upon the validation of those 100 meals being delivered, that $100 automatically goes up.
And usually the determination of whether the impact's been achieved or not would come from an impact measurement consultant that would structure up, what constitutes proven impacts, what points of data need to be collected, and it could be an arduous amount of data, or it could be just some basic data.
And so then the second last point of the data data sharing marketplace. It's really important to us at ICSO and at Social Suite too, where we want to stop creating data silos for impact. It's, there's so much good work being done and probably a lot of very similar work being done, but there really is no kind of cross collaboration or even just sharing of what's working, what's not working. And we do have, the technology, the AI, the machine learning that's kind of coming into the space now, where we do envision a future where we can not only deliver this impact, but also optimize that impact. And so that's, I think, really exciting. And then the last point of a new asset class for the impact economy is what we've talked about with tokens. And what we envision is tokens for impact. So a token is really, like Damien said, just the verified data piece or the receipt for what you've done. This token on the left is the ICSO token, which would be the token used to participate within the ICSO network. And the tokens you see on the right, so it says water, health, and you can imagine maybe there would be carbon. You could maybe have something like education. Is something probably a little bit farther down the line. But I think it just speaks to kind of our vision and our mission also to kind of potentially standardize these different impacts being done, as well as create this marketplace for them. And in a way that carbon credits now are pretty normalized, saving 1 unit of carbon in Australia could be the same, or is tradable with 1 unit of carbon being saved by a corporation in South Africa. Why not aim for a future where there's some standard for, clean water, or for delivering health programs, or educating young children? And then why not have some sort of standard, or why not at least envision or hope for a standard where we can then cross-trade those and create kind of a new economy out of that. So I think that's it for me. This is ICSO. We are, like Social Suite, aligned to achieve the 17 SDGs. We hope to count what matters, and through kind of our tokenization, value what counts. You can see the info and as well as my personal email down there. And
yeah, so as I mentioned before, we've partnered with ICSO. Social Suites, we're quite established in Australia around doing impact measurement. We've got impact measurement frameworks that cover a lot of different sectors. What we're looking for now is expressions of interest from organisations who would like to pilot a project that utilises Social Suite for impact measurement and data collection, and then uses the ICSO protocol and the integration there for verifying their impact, and also starting to provide some shared information around what they can do to help other organisations also lift up their social impact. And you can make your expressions of interest directly through the webinar organisers. So I guess on that note, we'd like to thank everyone for their time, and also a big thank you to Joyce, who's travelled to be here. So and we welcome any questions and an open discussion.
Thank you very much, Damien and Joyce, for presenting today. We actually haven't got any questions at this point in time, but if anybody does have any questions after reviewing the recording and having a further look into the information provided to you today, please feel free to contact me at events@connectingup.org, or contact Joyce directly on the email address that she provided on a previous slide. We'll send that out to everybody after the completion of this webinar. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you have any feedback or any requests for more information or for future webinars about blockchain, please feel free to email me, and I'll collate all the information and put together something for the future. Your webinar recording will be available within the next week, and the link will be sent out to you, so please keep an eye out on your inbox. If we don't have any further questions, then everybody enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Damien. Thanks, Joyce.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.